Hey, we all love challenging games, but some people really want to push it to the limit. So thanks to the wonderful work of some great modders out there, we've got 10 of our favorite examples of game mods that make already hard games even more challenging. And if you want to check these out for yourself, they're all linked down in the description below. But let's get started off with number 10. Kingdom Come Deliverance is already a pretty challenging game thanks to, its realism. It's got aspects of a survival game where you need to take care of yourself in this harsh medieval bohemian world, and that swordplay is highly realistic and you really need to pay attention to it. But what if it was all more realistic? Well, some ambitious modders got to it. Naxagashi's Ultimate Realism Overhaul makes things insane. You level up way slower, you're hungrier way faster, and the game works against you in that using meat is less efficient and merchants just don't cough up as much cash when you sell stuff. But more importantly, combat is even more specific. Ranged weapons have a way more realistic drop-off, and damage for weapons has been completely retooled. It's freaking nuts, but it's also part of the reason why you probably went to Kingdom Come Deliverance and why people enjoy it. So this just amps everything up, and it's crazy. But at number 9, this is another big one, Fallout New Vegas's World of Pain mod. It adds over 100 new locations filled with super hardcore enemies and loot and all that stuff, as well as quests, characters, and all that good stuff you come to the Fallout mod community for. The mod creators state that it adds enemies that can be tougher than anything else found in the game, which can be a real challenge for those up to it, and it adds around 300 new NPCs to get you set up on your journey into a bunch of underground locations filled with all these beefy enemies just ready to destroy you. It also adds a slew of new weapons and armor and items that have enhanced stats to give you a fighting chance, but some of them can also apparently hinder you and make the experience more challenging, as of course this mods the entire game. And if you needed any other reasons to like it, it's based on vanilla files, so it doesn't leave players lacking the DLC out in the cold, which is definitely a nice change. But at number 8, let's talk about Resident Evil 2. The Resident Evil 2 remake isn't exactly the hardest game on this list, at least not on your first main playthrough, but this mod is absolutely worth mentioning just because it takes some of the harder, more annoying enemies in the game and amplifies them. Yes, there's a mod to add more lickers into the game. The enemies that do tons of damage and are always conveniently blocking that hallway that you need to get past. You better get good at sneaking. You better get used to that. Oh, and also there's a mod where every enemy in the game is Mr. X. Like zombies, like from the start, all replaced with Mr. X and all of his charms. And oh my god, look at this. A huge shout out to Fluffy Quack for doing this one. But next at number 7, this Dark Souls one to me just sounds like a bad idea right from the start. You gotta be a masochist for this one. The Souls games are notoriously challenging, but you can use the Scorched Contract mod where with every boss you beat, you get increasingly debuffed, or, for the layman, powered down, making it progressively harder as you progress, but kind of in like an opposite world type of way. In a normal game, you beat a boss and things are going to get harder, but in this, beating a boss, you're going to get factually screwed over the second you slay that boss. It's just crazy, man. But next at number 6, Alien Isolation had tons of mods for the time after it was released, making, the enemies harder or the xenomorph more unpredictable, but the biggest hit was the ones that messed with the motion tracker. The most important tool of an Alien movie, the iconic motion tracker, and, a very important aspect of the game. There's a mod that completely removes it, adding a huge amount of tension to an already really stressful game. It seems like that mod was a hit because the developers, Creative Assembly, did eventually release their own game update with Nightmare difficulty mode that made the game much harder with less resources, more damage, and you guessed it, a broken motion tracker that was completely unpredictable. Thankfully, they also added a very easy mode, which is kind of like a nice counterpoint, but yeah, we're talking about the hard stuff, and this was nuts. Next at number 5, Darkest Dungeon is a very fun and satisfying game. Its awesome challenge, though, comes from straight up difficulty, but also the stress of managing your characters. The Pitch Black Dungeon mod makes it even crazier. Every decision you make is even more important and stressful when you're going through the quests. Tons of enemy subtypes are added, thousands of extra encounters, and a much more unforgiving in-game economy. There are like 9 more diseases, bosses are retooled, every ability and hero is completely rebalanced while you also generate more quests. You're rewarded by some extra lore that modders added to the game though, so that's nice. This is a massive comprehensive mod and very impressive. And if you're into Darkest Dungeon, you should absolutely check it out. Also, if you hate yourself, definitely check it out. Next up at number 4, we have the Frostfall Skyrim mod. This mod takes Skyrim and throws a layer of survival elements on top of it. The mod boasts 3 major components: hypothermia, cold water survival, and camping. So essentially here, the cold weather of Skyrim is trying to kill you. Survival games have utilized cold weather mechanics before, but Frostfall does it in a really interesting way. It's not about filling up bars and meters, but it is instead about good decision making and proper planning. So, like your armor, for example. Yeah, its armor rating matters for sure, but so does how warm it's going to keep you. Also, Skyrim's frequent blizzards could kill you if you get caught in one, and at night it gets drastically colder, so you also have to keep this in mind as well while traveling. You have to plan this all out. Honestly, this is the kind of Skyrim mod that I didn't know I wanted until I learned of its existence, honestly. And it's a big hit for a reason. It seems to implement survival mechanics better than some actual survival games do, and props to them. Now at number 3, Brutal Doom. It's one of those mods that turns a good game like Doom into something exponentially cooler and just it kicks a lot of ass. Now look, the base game is great. No one here is going to deny that of any of the Dooms. Brutal Doom just kicks it up to another level, adding stuff like ragdoll physics, more blood splatter, an updated particle system, vehicles, jibs, headshots, stealth kills, as well as just new weapons like a flamethrower, new rifle types, just to name a couple. The goal of the mod was to make the game more interactive, so allowing you to have a level of destruction in environments is great, but there also has to be more opposition in order for it to still be balanced, and man, did they tip the scales. The mod made everything faster, enemies hit way harder, so you're still probably just going to get your ass handed to you over and over, even more so than in the original game, but it's just so fun and cool that you don't care. Hell, the mod was so good that one of the Doom creators, of course, John Romero, once joked that if they had released the original game with the features of Brutal Doom, they would have, and I quote, destroyed the gaming industry. Also, side note, if you are into just Doom modding and challenging and stuff, also check out Project Brutality. That is absolutely worth a mention. But coming down to number 2, Stalker. It's a brutal game to begin with, but with the infamous Misery mod, it takes it to a whole new level. The mod aimed to provide a new, highly challenging experience that had an even bigger focus on the survival aspect, limiting resources, and forcing players to think differently than they would in the base game. The game did stuff like, absolutely screwing over anyone and anything that wasn't inside shelter during missions. And they even made all items cost way more than they originally did, and on top of that, your rewards for completing quests is way less, so you have to really grind harder and just play smarter. On the difficulty side, enemies are harder pretty much across the board. Your resilience to attack is drastically lowered, and they added an optional hardcore game start that starts you with little to no gear, and they even retooled the health system and economy to just make it way more oppressive and a difficult experience. It's probably one of the most hardcore mods we've seen yet. Also, we'll take any excuse just to talk about Stalker in general, because I don't think we talk about that game enough, but I digress. Now coming down to number 1, if you're going to talk about hard games that are made even harder with mods, you can't not bring up XCOM and the Long War mod. So you know how there's Iron Man mode, which is the hardest way to play XCOM, and it really makes the game harder. It takes away the ability to have multiple saves, for example, which makes every move you make permanent, and there's no rolling back to a save to fix something or save someone. Well, the Long War is harder than Iron Man. The Long War extends the campaign and makes it drastically longer, and also adds new classes, weapons, new enemies, and smarter enemies. And it also adds more micromanagement type things that are just going to eat up more of your time. There are infiltration mechanics that are added as well that have you send out multiple squads out at once. If you've played XCOM, you know how hard it is already, and if you've messed around with Iron Man mode, you know that it's even harder, but the Long War definitely isn't for everyone. It's for the hardest core XCOM player who's willing to rip out some of their hair and maybe even break their keyboard over their head while spending hours and hours playing this. We got one more as a bonus for you. This one is highly specific, but let's talk about City Skylines, baby. I personally really love city builders. They make you think, and they can be an incredibly challenging game of numbers. Hop on over to Steam Workshop, however, and you can make it a whole new ballgame. Multiple fans in the community have collected together a bunch of mods that all add up to just make the game just wonderfully difficult. If you've ever wanted to make City Skylines into basically just an urban planning simulator, there's a lot to make it that. There's a ton of variety and a lot of stuff. You can make buildings burn more realistically and have fires spread more aggressively. You can balance out the economy to make it more realistic, as well as population density in houses and apartment buildings, making it essentially just more to manage. You can also set it so consumption and waste buildup is at a more aggressive rate, and that turns things into a freaking nightmare. But it's all really, really fun. But of course, these are our favorite examples of difficult games that are made even harder by mods. There are plenty of other examples out there, so we definitely want to hear from you guys down in the comments. Is there a game you love that's challenging? Tell us why. Is there a game that's challenging that you like to make even more difficult through mods? Definitely let us know about that. We want to hear any examples you got down in the comments, but if you learned something from us, clicking the like button helps us out a ton. That's the best way you can show us some love, and we really appreciate that. But if you're new, it's worth subscribing because we put out new videos every single day. But as always, thanks for watching. We'll see you guys next time.